Hi, everyone. Hi, how are you? Let me hear it. How are you? Okay, good, good, good. I'm Michael Kushner, and I'm so excited to be a part of Grammy U 2024. This is so exciting. Did you have an amazing day? Yes, okay, cool. So this panel is going to be unbelievable. I've worked with a few people on this panel, and I'm very excited about it. But a little bit about me. I've been in the theater industry 23 years. I started as a child actor. And I'm an actor, photographer, producer, writer, podcaster, and educator. As a photographer, I photograph people like, I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but Julie Andrews, Hillary Clinton, Patti LuPone, Idina Menzel. No, anyone? Okay, cool. Just up-and-comers, really, just like I hope they make it one day. Yes, I'm on the producing team of the Emmy-nominated Indoor Boys, and it's just been really, really awesome to be part of this industry for so long and continuing to do so. But what's really cool is that there is such a cross-pollination between the music industry and the Broadway industry. So many jobs that you probably have never heard of. So I want to start talking about that with you guys, about, wow, I didn't know that I could be a part of this, or I didn't know that that job existed, or I do this thing in the industry, but I've always loved Broadway. Maybe I could start it there. So that's my goal today, is so that you can walk out of here being like, I have an idea, okay? So let's get this panel started. I'm gonna bring up these amazing, amazing artists. So joining me, this panelist is best known for his performance in the television shows Madam Secretary and Jersey Boys on stage and on the screen. Broadway audiences also know Erich from hit musicals such as Waitress and Chicago, and he is the creative force behind 6W Entertainment, a full-service production company. Please welcome to the stage, Erich Bergen. Yay! Yeah, go over there, sure.
Oh, that's you. Okay.
Yeah, that's me, great. Okay, next up, we have a two-time Grammy Award-winning record executive who currently serves as president and A&R for Atlantic Records. He has over 35 years of experience and has overseen some of the biggest albums of the last half century, including Santana's Supernatural, the original Broadway cast recording of Hamilton, that show, I hope it does well as well, and the motion picture soundtrack for The Greatest Showman. Welcome to the stage, Pete Ganbarg. Yay, I like your hat, Pete. Okay, next up, we have a panelist who co-founded DR Theatrical Management, which has developed and managed plays and musicals with artists like Alan Menken, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and Jodi Picoult. He is the president emeritus of the Off-Broadway League and an adjunct professor at Columbia University. Please give it up for Adam Hess. Yay! Hey, Adam. And our final panelist, who I'm very excited to bring up, is a Tony Award-nominated Broadway producer. She is a classically trained vocalist and has performed all across the globe. Her credits include the Tony-nominated revival of August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, the Tony-winning New York, New York, and the history-making How to Dance in Ohio, which I absolutely loved. Please welcome to the stage, Christen James. Yay! Give it up for these panelists. Oh my God, I get to sit here now and cross my legs like a true moderator. I love that. Like, I've always seen it, like inside the actor's studio and stuff. It's fabulous. Check that off the bucket list, which is wonderful. So a lot of the conversations that I like to have are from the perspective of the multi-hyphenate. Does anyone know what that word is? Has anyone ever heard of that word? Anyone? Multi-hyphenate? Anyone? Do I have anyone that wants to maybe share what a multi-hyphenate might be from the audience? Can do a little bit of everything, right? I like to say it's an artist who has multiple proficiencies which cross-pollinate to help flourish professional capabilities. So a lot of these questions are going to be from the perspective of the multi-hyphenate, doing multiple things at once, okay? So let's start with a very, maybe not simple question, because everyone is asking this question all the time, and there's 8 million different answers. But let's sort of go down the line, okay? What is a producer?
Oh, that's for you.
It's for all of us. Let's see. Am I on? I'm not on yet. I'll project.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. I'll start. A producer is the person that is willing to do anything to make their production happen. That's what a producer is.
It's actually a great question because it's a word and in a position that is often abused. And so you go into a Broadway show and you see all these names above the title and everyone says, I'm the producer. Not true. They are important because they are raising money and we need their money to fund the arts. So there's no disrespect there. But truly, a producer is the one working with the artist to really take the artist's vision and get it to the stage. They are the champions of the artist. They're the audience for the artist. They're the sounding board for the artist. And really, it's called show business. Show comes first, but you got to have the business right thereafter. And so they're to provide a good business model that supports the show.
Ultimately, the producer's in charge. If the show is going to succeed, it's going to be because of what they do. If the show is not going to succeed, it's going to not succeed despite their best efforts. So I don't know if that's pretty simple.
I always think that the biggest, for me, the thing that I'm always, when I really feel like a producer, is when I have to make when there's 8 choices to make, there's 8 ways that you can do the one thing in front of you, and all the eyes look to you. And the eyes that are looking at you may be smarter than you, and often are, right, but you're the one who has to make that decision and make that call, and sometimes it's just about making a decision. So that's the times when I really feel like, oh, I just produced something because I made a choice, sometimes the wrong one. But, you know, moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, how are we to tell what is the right decision when producing something, especially when there's so much money involved, when there's no time, we're on a deadline, right? And also, we were sort of talking about this a little bit backstage. In certain shows, you can see when there's a lot of ego in the creative team and the producing team, and when there's not a lot of ego in the creative team. And I feel like when there's ego involved, a lot of negative choices can be made, and when there's not a lot, it's more of the art that's coming forward, and there's a clearer message that's coming across in the show. So Erich, I mean, how do you work with the creative team of a show to create like a singular vision, or when you're working on something, like what are your methods of communication?
I've never produced a show on Broadway. I've never produced something like that. My production world has been in events, a lot of video content, commercials, music videos, things like that, a lot of virtual events. But as an actor, my job as an actor is where I've been on stage and on shows. I always feel like communication-wise, everyone should be, and this goes back to your thing about ego, everyone should be trying to make the thing that we're all working on together as best as it can be. Quincy Jones always had that great line when he brought everyone in to make We Are the World, where he put a sign on the door that said, leave your egos at the door. And I think that, rarely is there a project that is a singular person working on it. In fact, I don't think ever. So I think if there's someone else working on a thing besides you, the best thing you can do is say, we have to make that. We both have to make that thing. How do we make that as best as possible? So I think, once you're in the room, may the best idea win.
Yep. Christen, do you want to add on to any of that, working in an environment that is a commercial Broadway space?
Yeah, I think this is such a unique space, and one of the things that I love about live theater is that it's never the same. When you see a show, it's the same show, the story is the same, the players are the same, but the performance, the feeling, the energy, it's different every single night. And that's the wonderful thing about it. It's an evolution. And that's what I really love most about this space. I love how it can just evolve and it can become something that is very familiar, but also different. It has a different energy. The audience feeds off of the energy. And it's something that is just really meaningful. And I would agree, certainly, with Erich's perspective as well, because you have to bring your own magic to whatever it is that you're doing, be it on Broadway or in a music video. You have to bring what you do to the production to make it great.
Yes. So how many of you have an idea of how to take an idea of a musical or a play and bring it to Broadway? Anyone have any idea how it even starts? Lauren Molina, Broadway's Lauren Molina in the audience has an idea. Icon legend. Anyone else? Anyone else? We have some hands over here. Christen, can you maybe sort of guide us through how does an idea go from page to stage on Broadway?
Yeah, certainly. So an idea starts like any idea does. You're like, oh, you know what would really make a great musical? And then it takes years of development and fundraising and heartbreak and all kinds of other things in order to get to the stage. I like to think about any show that makes it to Broadway, or any theater, truly, but certainly Broadway, as a miracle. And I don't mean that negatively. It's a beautiful thing. When you go to see a Broadway show, you are witnessing a miracle, and I will tell you why. When a creative on the team, the book writer or the composer has an idea, the development of that idea is tremendous. It is all-consuming. It just takes over until it's done, and that's your first draft. Then you bring on the rest of your creative team. You've got to find the money to bring on your creative team. So first you actually need to find people that will invest in you, that will do what's called like a developmental round with you so that you can develop your show, so that you can bring on creative team members, so that you can find people that are all necessary to help you bring that idea to life, to help fine-tune that idea, to cut huge portions of that idea out and leave it on the cutting room floor and break your heart when there's that song that you wrote that's really important to you that doesn't make it into the show. And then from there, you need to showcase your product effectively, because that's what a musical is. It's your product that you are selling. And then you've got to find other people like me as a co-producer who will join you in that vision and who will then go out and evangelize your product for you and raise money for you and find people to bring into the production who all believe in this show and in this thing that you've created. And then from there, you've got to find a theater. And then from there, you've got to schedule your show. And then from there, you've got to finish your fundraising round and hope that you can finish your fundraising. And then after that, hopefully you open, you have a great opening, you need to have wonderful reviews, and your show goes on to be successful like so many amazing other shows. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. And that's why I say anytime you're able to see a story make it to the stage, it's a miracle. Because the first time to play that first show, it means that everything went sort of kind of right to bring you to that moment where you are raising the curtain on your production. And it takes years sometimes it takes less, but it really takes, I think, a tremendous amount of dedication, and that is representative on the list that live theater is. There are thousands of people, a lot of money. It's a weekly business. You're up one week, you're down the next. But it's worth it. Every single part of it is worth it. All of the years, all of the anxiety, all of the nail biting, it's the most wonderful art form. And it's worth it to put in the work to make that miracle happen.
You make such a great point, especially about the people that are involved. There are so many jobs in the theater, right? And to bring a show to Broadway, right? It's from the producers, but there's also music copyists, there's stage managers, there's orchestrators, there's the writers, there's even Uber drivers, right? Like there are so many different types of people, partnering restaurants even, advertisers, press reps. There are so many different types of people that lift a show higher. And there's, of course, the technical aspect of a Broadway show. So Adam, when working on a production aspect, how does the music or musical number affect your production decisions from set building to blocking to choreography?
I'm going to try this.
Do a little switcheroo.
Yeah, to me, I mean, it's the source, right? So, and everything springs from that. And when we're putting a show together, it's actually a play's easier because you have a script, you know how many actors there are, you know where it's located, so you can kind of budget out and figure out what's going on. But with the music, is it going to be a dance musical?
Right.
Is it going to be a full band? Is it going to be a chamber musical? And so when you're starting with developing the show, it's really one of the key people is your orchestrator. You have your composer and your lyricist who have given you birth this beautiful piece of art that you're then going to take. And it's really the next person right in there is your orchestrator. And looking back at Kinky Boots, I mean, Cyndi Lauper knew how to write music, but writing a song or a pop song versus the stage where it has to tell a story, and how is that? What is the musical sound to that? The relationship between her and Steve Remus was her orchestrator was they were tight, and the success of that show really comes from their relationship and his taking what she was doing and really sort of expanding upon that. First, and you had your dance trainer, who's another person in the room who's taking the motifs of the songs that Cyndi wrote, and now choreographically, what does that choreographer want to do? So all of this is we have a lot of conversations at the beginning of the process, because one of the things we have to do on the money side is make sure we've got money to do it. And therefore, you're planning out all of these permutations and combinations so that you're giving avenues for the artist to develop and grow, and making sure that we don't stop before, like you said, it is a miracle to get up there.
Yeah.
So it just keeps snowballing with position after position. And really what we're trying to do at the beginning is try and forecast and give as many options as possible. And sometimes it will come to a point where you got to say, sorry, that we got to cut a couple of musicians. That's a little bit, right. We can't afford it, which is terrible words to say. But you need to create a business model that will be successful. So those are tough conversations to have.
And seeing that literally come together, I think, is really exciting. Who here has seen Wicked before, right? Okay, so what is one of the most exciting parts of the show? When she flies, exactly, in Defying Gravity. So that is a great example of how all of those different people come together, right? We have, what's one of the most exciting parts of it? What's the literal exciting thing about her flying? Well, yeah, there's that. There are the Idina's vocals, right, which were incredible. But there's also the lighting, the sets. What else? The flying, the effects, the smoke. What else? The costumes. The what? You're literally here for it. The music, right? Right. Hello, number one. There's that, but then there's also Winnie Holtzman's, book saying it's not her. She has nothing to do with it. I'm the one you want. It's me. It's me. And she starts flying. And then we have the lyrics. There's so many different people and their ideas that are creating that one really, really exciting moment. Another moment is the '94 revival of Carousel, I think, at Lincoln Center, right? When the carousel literally comes out of the stage, and oh my God, I'm getting the chills thinking about it. YouTube that immediately, because it's like one of the most, I wish I was there in that space to see it, with the music paired with it. It's just brilliant. What you can do on a Broadway stage, how you can tell a story is incredible, as long as everyone is willing to tell that story, which doesn't always happen. Not everyone has, the same ideas, and then that creates contention and potentially creates something that I love, and that's a flop. And not everyone's ideas are out there, and a show fails, which I love just as much as a big hit, because there are so many amazing songs that people don't really get to hear ever, and that leads me to cast albums. Something I like to do every morning, and you can call me a geek, it's okay, is I like to wake up and I like to do my computer work while listening to a different cast album that I don't know, and I learned so much. And a lot of them are usually flops, right? So like this morning I was listening to A Tree Grows in Brooklyn and Bejor. That's okay. So, and I love, but you know, how do some of us get to know about Broadway? What's the first thing we look up to see? Is a soundtrack, a cast album, as we like to call it in the Broadway industry, a cast album. And it's literally a recording. And back in the day, right, like so many people would get their big record, right, and memorize the pictures and read everything and memorize the lyrics and hope and dream and wish and pray that they could be one day in New York and go see a show. So, cast albums, how important is it to the success of a Broadway show? What is it like recording a cast album? How do you even start? What's the connection between producer and the producer of the album?
Shall I?
Yes, please.
So, when you're a major commercial record label, I work for Atlantic Records, which is a 75-year-old major record label that basically only cares about one thing, having hits. You know, and how do you have hits now? It's mainly through streaming, right? So take that, put it side by side with what a traditional cast recording would sound like. It's not necessarily one and the same, especially since when you're recording a cast album, it's much different than recording a pop album because you have union fees and the costs rise and rise and rise from the musicians to the vocalists. We literally have people sitting in the studio with stopwatches because the union rules are very strict. And when you're going to attempt to make a cast recording, the price tag is higher than what you would imagine. So a lot of labels stay away from it because chances of having a financially successful cast recording, the odds are against you. So when we started, we figured that if we picked the right properties, it wouldn't matter how much money it cost to make the recording, because if it's the right property, then, you know, everything will come back to us. And when Atlantic got back into the cast album business, was around 10 years ago, and was Hamilton was the first one. That has now become the best-selling cast recording of all time. So that means for me, I get to live to fight another day and do another one.
Right. You mean Wildcat is not the most popular cast album of all
Not
time?
yet.
That's
Not yet.
crazy to me. I'm just kidding.
But we've done in the last decade, up until this week, we had done 6 of them in the last 8 or 9 years. 3 of them are financially successful, 3 of them are not, right? So you think, oh, well, that's not great. Well, it is great, because when you're batting 500, that's really great, right? We put out one yesterday, which is The Notebook. We start recording one tomorrow night, which is Suffs. So that will take us either to 8 or 9 over the last decade. But it's not for the faint of heart, because they're very expensive projects.
Wow, that's awesome.
Can I just say just one thing about just
Please
what you were
do.
talking about the music? Everything, it was like what Ad was saying earlier, everything, the sets are important, the lighting is important, the management behind the scenes, every piece is vital to making any project successful, but no one leaves a show humming the lighting, right? And at the end of the day, the music is the most important thing, I think, in a Broadway musical. It is the thing that if you strip away the lights, the sounds, the lighting, the set, I mean, you know, you can still do the show as long as you can sing the songs to a degree. And you think of those important moments in musicals, Wicked, that one being one, it is crafted to such a perfect moments so that when she goes, say the lines again because you know them by heart.
It's not her. She has nothing to do with it. I'm the one you want. It's me. It's me.
And as she screams, "It's me," she rises up and something happens to the entire theater. People start crying, they start screaming, they throw themselves off the balcony. It's wild what happens in that theater. And those moments are, I can guarantee you, they tried other things first. They tried other songs first. They tried other things to get there. The same when Frozen went to Broadway, and they changed the kind of the storyline of the show so that all of a sudden Let It Go became the defying gravity moment at the end of Act 1. It ended with a huge, and again, people throwing themselves off the balcony. It was happening all over again. That moment is such an important thing. And you see it in pop music. You see it in, if you go on YouTube, the demos of songs like Thriller. The first version of Thriller is something completely different, and you hear it and you go, oh yeah, it's not really great. And then it becomes Thriller. Pete, the Suffs, the show that Pete is doing the cast album for, we were just talking about this earlier. Well, you say it. Shane, it was off Broadway to Broadway. She's like rewritten half the score or something like that. At least half the score. I mean, it's the music, making the music happen and be important is like the most important thing. It is actually, at the end of the day, it might be about the song. It might just be about the song.
One interesting thing about Suffs is that the show opened this past Thursday night, which is mid-April 2024. Exactly 10 years to the week that Rachel Sussman, one of the lead producers, had emailed Shana Taub, the creative, I have an idea for you. It took 10 years. One step forward, 2 steps backwards, 3 steps forward, 2 steps backwards. It's not easy. This is not for the faint of heart, as these guys can tell you for sure.
There was just a show on Broadway called Harmony. It was Barry Manilow's musical. And there was a pre-Broadway tryout of that in California in 1995. So that's even longer than 10 years, right? That's a while. Some shows like Carrie, right? Some shows like Carrie was considered one of the greatest flops. And I should clarify what a flop is. It's a very unsuccessful show. And it was on Broadway in the 80s. And it was like an urban legend, right? And then it had a revival off Broadway in a smaller theater. They rewrote it, just like what Shana did with Suffs, the writer of Suffs. They rewrote it, fixed it, added things, and leaned into the campiness of it a little bit, and it became a massive hit. And that cast album is probably one of the most popular musical theater cast albums as well. So, time is a huge factor when it comes to Broadway, I think, to add to what Christen is talking about as well. And, what is happening in the world as well really affects what's happening on stage. And, what Erich was saying about music the songs might be the most important part. I think that's why it's called musical theater.
Right. And it's interesting because you mentioned the importance of cast albums, and exactly what Pete was saying, because of the price, it's very difficult. But there's been a switch a little bit in terms of Be More Chill is the example, where small out-of-town production, and it was the cast album that they did that propelled that show to off-Broadway and then to Broadway. But it was because they did that where it flopped.
I invested in it. I know,
which is unfortunate. But the point of it is we're now seeing cast albums as a marketing expense as opposed to a revenue expense.
Wow.
And getting some demos out there when you have that initial show, songs are going to change, things are going to change. But if you can get 3 or 4 songs out there and can get into the earworm of your audiences, that's the way we can kind of propel theater forward. And it gives something to say, oh, that song. So we're kind of looking at it slightly differently because of the expense that Pete's talking about.
You're also able to promote the music now in ways that you haven't been able to promote it before. So using short form content from the music to reach a younger audience. Like a couple of examples of that is, the song that Kimiko does in Waitress went viral on TikTok. One of the Alex Brightman songs from Beetlejuice went viral on TikTok.
Yep.
Beetlejuice may not have been the most successful show of all time, but the cast album probably is going to end up being successful because of that.
Well, look at a show like Beetlejuice. It's similar to, Kristen, were you going to say something? I don't want to interrupt.
Well, I was just going to say Beetlejuice is actually one of my favorite cast albums of all time. And it was a discovery tool. And that's also the power of the cast album, too. It's archival because it means this happened, and here's how it sounded when it was on stage, in case you didn't get to see it. But to Pete's point, it is a huge discovery tool. It's absolutely necessary. A lot of us experience cast albums even before we see the show. That certainly was the case for me with Beetlejuice and a lot of other shows as well. So it's expensive but vitally important as a discovery tool.
The TikTok, the other day I was in one room in the apartment, and all of a sudden I heard in the living room, I heard coming out of my girlfriend's phone, I heard like the beginning of like, dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
Why did I do it? What did it get me? And I know that my girlfriend's not listening to show tunes in the house, and I was like, why is Gypsy coming from this? I mean, what is happening? And I go out, and I was like, what are you listening to? And she plays it again. Dun 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 dun. Why did I do it? What did it get me? I was like, why are we listening to Rose's Turn? She's like, no, it's not. It's the sound on this video. I was like, it's Rosie's Turn from Gypsy. So the archival of it all. I mean, that's a song that's from the 50s and is now having this whole other life again as a sound that people put to when people are sitting around with their children. I guess it's a video of a mother holding her child and saying, why did I do it? What did, yeah.
Yep.
But how many people knew that was from Gypsy if you've heard it on TikTok?
Oh, yes.
Yes, that's my thought.
Now
I'm saying he would know. Yeah.
Now you know.
Yeah, now you know.
I mean, one of the reasons that we do spend the money that we spend on the cast albums is because they are going to live forever.
Right.
So what separates Atlantic from a lot of the other labels that are making cast recordings is we treat them like pop records.
Yeah.
So we're not afraid to spend the money because, you put our Hamilton album or our Dear Evan Hansen album up against any other pop album. We're using the same mixers, we're using the same mastering engineers, we're using the same studios, and we're spending the same amount of money. So it's going to sound elevated to what a cast album would sound like if you were doing it in 36 hours because you don't have the budget to do it.
This is you and I could nerd about this stuff for so long. I just want to say one other thing. Treating it like a pop album is also another important part. You all know the song "And I'm Telling You" from Dreamgirls, right? We've seen every last person who thinks they can sing it, every last person who actually can sing it, and then we've seen every drag queen sing it or lip sync to it. So on the cast album for Dreamgirls, which I think was a David Geffen produced album, it's so smart. At the end of "And I'm Telling You," she finishes "You're gonna love me," and it ends with bum, 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 and it gives it a final moment. It ends like a single. Well, in the show, she kind of goes backwards, and a new scene comes in. The moment continues. That cast album was how we all thought. That's how we all thought it ended. That's how everyone sang the song. That's how everyone, because it gave it a button. It gave it a finale. So treating things in a way that give it to the world maybe differently from the way that it is in the show is also a huge important part.
So we're talking about all of these different ideas and images that sort of excite us as an audience and propel us to keep working on new projects and new pictures, stage pictures and sounds. So what are you all drawn to when you take on a project? When you are working on new theater, on new ideas, what are you guys drawn to? Let's start with Erich first. Or let's do Kristen first.
A paycheck.
Yeah, a paycheck. Good. That's pretty motivational. It's
sorry, really quick, a quick plug since we were talking about Dreamgirls. For anyone that is looking to discover that show in its Broadway version, which is fantastic, there's actually a phenomenal live concert album that stars Billy Porter,
Yes.
is James Jimmy Early, Audra McDonald is Dina Jones, Lilius White as Evie. Okay, it's worth a listen. Just so you know, it's on all streaming platforms. It will become your musical Bible, just FYI.
It's amazing.
Okay, what do I look for when I'm joining a new project? Meaningful storytelling. I think that that's key. And if it's a musical, great music. Music absolutely makes the difference. It's what we go to a musical for. The story matters. The book absolutely matters. But content is queen, truly. Content matters. Having a great story, and content is the whole thing, the story as well as the music. Adam and I actually have the great pleasure of serving as co-producers for a show that's currently running on Broadway called Appropriate, which is a phenomenal show written by Brandon Jacob Jenkins. And I remember reading this show for the first time, and it took my breath away. And I thought to myself, God, I want to get on this so bad. And that's sometimes just enough. Reading something that just resonates with you, that stays with you, that you think about. That's what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to disrupt a little, either in a good way or in a bad way. But it's supposed to just change what you're doing to the point where you're thinking about it, where it's influencing you, where it's working in the background. That's what I look for.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's the storytelling has to be there, and then the other part of it is I look to the collaborators and the artists.
Yeah.
Are they collaborators? Because you can have a fantastic idea, but if you're so ingrained with that idea, you're probably going to crush your own dream. And so it's about allowing other people to come in, which is so intimate in terms of what an artist does. It's allowing people and sort of allowing them to take on part of their storytelling and their idea. And so those are the artists that I want to work with, because it truly, once you get the director in there, the scenic designer, the actors, the musicians, everybody's going to add a little bit of something to it. And so at the beginning, those artists have to be open to allowing those people in. And that's something that I really look for in terms of that new projects.
I think for me, I'm always looking for things that have the potential to affect culture. Are people going to care? It's the same thing the same philosophy that I have as an A&R person for a record label is my opinion doesn't matter. The only opinion that matters is the audience's opinion. So can I be helpful in finding a property, whether it's a song, whether it's an artist who wants to make an album, whether it's a Broadway cast album, whether it's a motion picture or television music soundtrack, that people are going to want to hear and invest in and listen to over and over and over again, the way that we all did when we were kids.
Right.
You know, I was a kid who grew up in the suburbs and, driving with my family. My dad had a Cadillac with an 8-track tape player that we listened to a chorus line every time we were in the car, So those songs, I can tell you without ever having seen the show before I saw it, I knew those songs back and forth.
Yeah.
Now that I'm in a position to make decisions to decide, hey, our company, there are a few hundred people that work here, we're going to get behind this. Does the audience know, will the audience want this, even if right now they don't know they want it? Those are the properties I want to get involved in.
Amazing. Still paycheck?
Yeah, paycheck. Well, please. I don't know. I think the idea that if you ever play a new song and at the end of it you go, I want to hear it again. That's what we're all looking for, is that moment. And it doesn't happen that often, which is why all of us have to hustle, because we are all chasing after that it's me. We're all chasing after that wicked moment. I think if you see something and you go, oh, that was good. It wasn't. You everything that you are that you love to want to be involved in, that you should say more than that was funny or that was good. You should say, I'm going to the box office, I'm buying a ticket to see it again, or play the song again, or let's do it again.
Yeah.
Those moments, chasing after that high is what we're all after. If no one has ever heard Lionel Richie's All Night Long too many times, you know the feeling that song gives you when it gets you on a dance floor and it moves? We're all chasing after that. We're all chasing after Wicked. Yeah. We're all chasing after that. We're all chasing after Hamilton. Believe me, we're all chasing after Hamilton. But that's the thing that I really look for.
Yeah, I love that because we're so moved as artists in so many different ways. So many people will be like, I loved this and I hated that. And I love talking about it very openly, being like, oh, I'm so glad that you liked that show. I didn't. And here's why. Why did you like it? I love that because that's what makes it an art form. And we get to talk about, oh, I'm in search of those things. And, my friend Lauren, who's in the audience, she did this revival of Sweeney Todd on Broadway, where it was an actor instrumental version of Sweeney Todd, and she plays the cello and played Joanna. And it was brilliant. I saw it when I was 14 years old, and I was so moved. And then recently did an actor instrumental version, as actors playing the roles, but also playing their instruments of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And I flew to Cincinnati to go see this production of it, and I was so moved by it. I was literally sobbing because of how they did it. And I think that's another conversation, right? Is when shows start or end outside of New York. New York is not the only place where Broadway happens, where musical theater happens. Musical theater starts somewhere else in something called an out-of-town tryout, where there might be a run of a show and they play it to those audiences and see what works. Wicked did that. Legally Blonde did it. Hairspray did it. The producers did it. And that might be why they might be some of the biggest hits in Broadway history, right? Because they fixed everything out there and then they came to New York when they were ready. And then some shows end on the road. So how do you guys sort of navigate regional theater, which is where theater happens in theaters in your hometown, where you're from, outside of New York, and national tours? Is the producing goals any different than when it's here in New York?
Well, and I want to say, I also think all art has the right home. So we use the example of Be More Chill. If it had stayed off Broadway, right, I think it could have run for years. Yeah. And it's because Broadway isn't it's almost like Broadway is a marble picture, right? It's the tentpole musical. But what about Fox Searchlight? What about A24? Some of those A24 shows, which are brilliant and lovely, are meant to be seen in an intimate setting, in an off-Broadway setting. And so I think finding the art and matching it with the home,
yes,
going into the regional theater is very important. We have Titanic, that's playing at our theater downtown. If you haven't seen it, you must see it. It is hysterical. It is brilliant. You will truly laugh the whole way through, and you'll hear some amazing voices. But it belongs off Broadway, and hopefully will run for years and years and years. Little Shop, if you haven't seen it, it's a lovely production. Finding the right home, it works because you're right here with the audience. And if you're in the Broadway house and you're sitting in the back, you're going to miss that experience. So I think in terms of the regional theaters, it's definitely a tryout, but it's also finding where it does belong, because the regional circuit is wonderful too. And sometimes maybe it belongs in the not-for-profit realm.
I love that you said that, because I saw the pre-Broadway tryout of the Little Shop the Broadway run in 2002, 2003. Billy Porter was the voice of Audrey too, and which was really cool. And it was a whole different cast, and then everyone was famously fired from this production except one actor, and then it was brought to Broadway, and it did not do well because Little Shop is this cult musical that existed so beautifully off Broadway, and it was dirty and gritty and in your face. And when it went to Broadway, it didn't do well because it was too polished, it was too far away, it didn't feel like that. Now this current revival that's happening right now at the West Side Theater, does anyone watch Drag Race? Anyone watch Drag Race? Yeah, Jinx Monsoon is currently starring as Audrey in it. So you should really go see it. It works so well. The plant, when it gets to its biggest size, is in your face and it comes out in the audience. It's miraculous. And Titanic, you really, I mean, anyone know the movie Titanic? Okay, this is set, this musical is, it's the story of Titanic. I have to get up for a second. It's the story of Titanic told from the perspective of Celine Dion with her music. And it is one of the funniest things in the world. So if you have a chance to go see it as well, but it works so beautifully because it knows its space, it knows the vibe, it knows its story. The creative team was all on the same page when they created it in LA to make themselves laugh, right? Because they were able to do that, they're able to make us laugh as well. And I think that is some of the most successful musical theater we'll see.
We just did the out of town tryout of a show that I'm working on as a performer called Boop, which is the Betty Boop musical that David Foster wrote the music for, and Jerry Mitchell from Kinky Boots and basically every show that's ever made you smile. Jerry directed it, and we were doing changes every single night, including past opening night, because we were figuring it out on its feet, and we were finding the jokes. We put in a new closing number the day before opening night. So the closing number that was reviewed by the critics, we had only had 48 hours with. And it's about, you talk about your art finding the right home. It's also the art finding the right spot in the show. I mean, it is such a craft. It is such a science. Seeing where the laughs landed every single night. Why didn't that song work? Oh, that light cue messed up the laugh. All those different things, figuring that out on the way into New York. That process out there was vital to this show's life. Truly, truly vital.
I can't wait to see it.
Neither do I.
Yeah. I mean, Mel Brooks, comedy legend, right? And Multi-Hyphenate, actor, producer, writer, director of Blazing Saddles, History of the World Part 1, Young Frankenstein, the producers. He likens comedy to music and to drumming because it has a rhythm. And so there are so many ways to approach things like that because everyone hears it differently, just like everyone hears theater and music differently as well. How many of you want to be in New York? How many of you want to be in LA? How many of you want to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma? You can be if you want to be. But the whole point is that theater exists on, on a universal plane. It doesn't just have to be here. It doesn't have to just be in a huge city. It could be from anywhere, especially now with TikTok and with social media. You can create anything and put it on there and you never know where it'll go. But I want to talk a little bit about, bring it back to the Multi-Hyphenate just a little bit. Now, the Multi-Hyphenate idea has been around for a while. I mentioned Mel Brooks, but a lot of sort of people have been told you only have to do one thing. You can do only one thing. You have to either be an actor or a singer or a writer. You can't do it all. But yet, so many successful people get to do it, right? Lin-Manuel Miranda, Mel Brooks, Whoopi Goldberg, so many A-list celebrities get to be multi-hyphenates, yet artists who are starting out don't get to be. We have to stay in our lane and do one thing. So I want to know from you all, how do you get to be multi-hyphenates in your own life? And what are some success stories for you? Because for me, it's a very, very specific schedule, right? Today, I got to be an actor, right? I had 2 self-tapes I had to do. And that felt really, really great. And on a day where I have a client in my photo studio, I make it really specific. Right before my client comes, I'll do my self-tape, get it done. Then I put on my photographer hat, and I'm a photographer. And then when that's done, I go to my computer, answer emails, maybe put on my producer hat. I think a very specific schedule and setting boundaries and clear expectations with my co-collaborators is something that I do to find success in the industry. So what about you working on your day-to-day? Does anyone want to shout out, or should I start with Christen?
I'm happy to start. I would say I love the term multi-hyphenate because, to your point, when you're first starting out, you feel like I can only do this one thing. I was really good at singing and I loved singing, but I thought I was good at other things too. And there was this kind of internal struggle of, well, you can't do both. You can. You can do all three or all five. I think the key is make sure you're good at all of those things, because then you don't fall into the, we've all heard it, jack of all trades, master of none. I think if you find things that you enjoy and that you're really good at, you can be a great multi-hyphenate if you practice your discipline and you become good at it. Because we have the capacity as humans and as people who are passionate about art and business and all kinds of other things to be great at any of the things that we do if we put the effort and work and time into perfecting it, what perfection looks like for us. So I would say the best way to really be a great multi-hyphenate is be good at all of your multi-hyphenates.
Ugh, I love you.
I'll take this one too. I think that for me, it's always been about following the bouncing ball. You know, it's like, oh, I have an idea. I think that would be cool. Let me try it. You know, and one thing that I learned kind of along the long kind of winding road of my career over the last few decades has been, don't wait for permission. If you've got a great idea, you know, what is the difference between you and the person who happens to be signing your paychecks, or you know, who are you waiting for permission from? When you know, when I worked for Clive Davis, Erich and I were talking earlier backstage. You know, Clive's a very demanding guy. When I worked for him, I had this idea. He had just signed Carlos Santana, and I had an idea to make a certain type of album with Carlos that Clive didn't have the same idea. He didn't really know what to do yet. He had just signed him. This was a guy who was a household name, but nobody really had any reason to go out and buy new music from this guy in 15, 20 years because he hadn't given them a reason. So it was almost like, okay, you have Coca-Cola. How do you convince people to do it, to go out and buy it again? Everyone knows the name, but let's give them a reason. I had this idea, and I pitched Clive on the idea. I wrote him a memo, and it was like, Clive, here's my idea. It's basically a duets album, but Carlos's voice would be the guitar, and we get all these young artists who were inspired by him to make music as kids to collaborate with him. And if we do it right, we get hit songs from these people as their kind of price of entry. Carlos's voice is his guitar, so it's not going to age. We could actually get this stuff on the radio, and the kids and the parents who are fans of both Carlos and the collaborators will listen to the album together. If we get it right, it could be really successful, and it could win a lot of Grammys. I was looking in my crystal ball, and I sent this memo to Clive, and he never responded. Never responded. Never told me it was a shitty idea. Never told me it was a good idea. And I could have easily said, well, I didn't hear back from the boss. Okay,
Right.
next. I'm like, no, it's a good idea. Let me try it. And I started. I didn't wait for permission. And it's now, you know, one of the biggest albums of all time. So it was like, you know, and eventually Clive's like, that's a great idea. Let's do it together, you know, but he's the boss. He, you know, I think that what that taught me is, you know, my idea, you know, it might be successful, it might be a failure, but the idea has as good a shot as anyone else's idea. And nobody should be in a position to tell me that I can't try it, you know?
Thank you.
I can't beat 8 Grammys or whatever that was.
9.
Okay. That's right. I could just say that the phrase no one's a multi-hyphenate because somebody told them to be, right? Nobody's working harder than they have to on something they don't want to. Multi-hyphenates only happen if you're passionate about another thing. So if there's something else that you're maybe good at, or, oh, I could do that, yes, of course you could do that. But unless it's something that you wake up thinking about, you shouldn't do it. because being multi-anything takes double. It's not like you split your time 50%. You just do 200%. So it's a very, very hard thing to be a multi-hyphenate, and it's not anything to brag about either. It just means that you also love that, and you will die if you don't do that other thing. There are brilliantly talented, wonderful people that I look up to that are my heroes that do one thing and do it brilliantly. But if you feel that thing, if you feel that pull, and there is time in your day to do it, try to do it, because you'll always think, I should have.
It's a great point, because, you know, if you do 5 things, then you risk 5 times failure. And a lot of people don't like to face failure, so that means they're going to do the least amount of stuff that they can do to avoid that failure. But multi-hyphenating comes out of the need to tell a story. That's why historically, and I write about this in my book, How to Be a Multi-Hyphenate in the Theater Business, historically, multi-hyphenates are primarily made up of people from marginalized, decentered, or underrepresented communities, because those stories were not told historically. And a lot of multi-hyphenates have to create their own work to be centered and tell those stories. So, it's the want, but it's also the need to make sure that you could tell those stories.
Yeah, and again, who is your team? Because if you are writing a show for yourself, who is your objective eye? And you have to make sure that you trust that person and that they have your back, they understand what you're doing. Because as if you're, Shannon Taub, and when she's starring in it and writing in it, she can't hear the audience's reaction to what's going on. So she needs to have someone that she trusts in that audience to let her know that line didn't work, or that music wasn't where they wanted it to be. So you have to know who your team is and really trust them, and then ignore all the other voices, because there's going to be a lot of other voices who say you can't, you shouldn't, and you got to shut those guys out and listen to your core team.
Thank you for those amazing answers, everyone. We're going to open it up to questions now. We have time for about 2 questions. Does anyone? Yes. Maybe more if we, no, I'm just kidding.
So you had discussed past albums as a tool to archive and market. I'm curious, do you find that the rise in past albums being recorded have led to more recoupment and licensing and content licensing and on?
And what's your name? Alana. And where are you from? New York. Nice, amazing. Who wants to take that?
Yes. Yeah, I think to what we were saying before, it really is a tool that promotes the show. And so you get that cast album, and then if you're going to do a tour, if that music is in, the zeitgeist for 6 months, then someone's going to say, when that show, they find out the show's coming to Topeka, Kansas, I want to buy that show because I've been listening to that song. So I think it's vitally important. Yeah.
It's really interesting when you open a show and no one's heard the music yet, the response is different from when everyone knows the songs. When we started working with Hamilton seems like the most obvious idea now, but believe me, it was not, right? It was like, okay, here's the elevator pitch. I always say it's such a crazy elevator pitch that, we're going to tell the story of, it's actually the story of the American Revolution told by the Founding Fathers. They're all played by actors of color, and all the songs are hip hop. But mainly we're talking about states' rights and the federal bank. Think about that. It's not really it's such a bad elevator pitch that someone would, open the elevator doors and throw you down the elevator shaft. That's, what it was before it was a thing. But the music, once we put the cast album out, everyone memorized all the songs. So they came knowing all 46 songs, right? Every word, and the song like Guns and Ships, where Daveed Diggs does the double time, triple time rap, kids would do that, on TikTok and became a thing. So that drives more consumption of our cast album, but it also drives more people to want to go buy a ticket and see the show.
The current example of this, I think, that the cast album is very dependent for, in 1981, a little show on Broadway ran for 5 performances. It had 3 weeks of previews, but it had 5 performances off Broadway because it was the biggest flop in the world. It was called Merrily We Roll Along, written by Stephen Sondheim. It was a disaster. And famously, they recorded the cast album the day after closing night, which is when they were already set to record the album. Cut to 2024, it is the biggest hit on Broadway. So I can guarantee you that show would not have been the hit it is today, starring Daniel Radcliffe, if that cast album hadn't been recorded in 1981.
Time.
There's no timeline on anything that has to do with theater, right? So you have an idea today, you're like, this is going to go fast. It's not going to go fast. You mentioned Harmony. You mentioned Merrily. It's like 30 years, 40 years. And Harmony finally makes it to Broadway and it closes. So it's not always happy endings either.
There's also Florida Thespians. There's these thespian competitions where those are like built-in advertisements for shows because students hear these solos, these duets on these cast albums, and they're like, I want to do that. I'm going to do it for Florida Thespians. And they do it, and all of these kids see it, and they go, what is that song? And then they listen to that. Florida Thespians is 11,000 kids. That is built-in downloads, and there's a show called Ride the Cyclone that hasn't even come to New York yet, but it is the talk of the town. Every kid is obsessed with it, and they all do songs from Ride the Cyclone. Hasn't even hit New York
But
yet.
there is a cast album out.
But there's a cast album out. Oh, was up. Thanks. Thank you, Larmelina. So it did hit New York in the off-Broadway space, but because of the cast album, now everyone can download it. And do I have time for one more question? Is that good? Yeah, cool. You got another question? Another question? Anyone? Over there. Bueller, where? Oh, hi. What's your name? Nick, where are you from?
From New York, but came from school.
Oh, nice.
Question I have is, you mentioned short form content, and it's like the high of the third. So how do promote of that short form content? How do you get it in front of the face? Like people discovering it, because obviously that's what it's all about today. It's short form content, getting it in front of many of these ads, and then just translate that to people buying the show.
It's really hard because there is so much music released. So there are over 125,000 songs uploaded to streaming services every day. Every day. Multiply that by 7, multiply that by 31 days in a month, it's a lot. So the same way that we need to be creative with our non-theatrical music, you need to be creative with your theatrical music. Like, how is it going to get attention? How is it going to cut through the noise? Every show has a digital agency attached to it, and their job is to help with short-form content and try to come up with unique ways to get people to first view and then care, but it's not easy.
I think there is such an art form to short-form content, TikTok, Instagram marketing, all of that stuff that falls under the umbrella of how do you sell a product, right? It's now gone beyond a commercial. Now this is its own piece of content, right? There's an art form. It's not just it's not just a marketing PR person saying, what if we got everyone to, no, there's the editing of it, the execution of it, all of it is so vital. And that, in my opinion, that's its own thing. There are experts in that. There are people who work hard on that. But it doesn't matter if the thing that you're selling is crap. I think it's so, we talk so much now about short form content and getting the word out there that sometimes I always feel like we forget that, what about the thing we're selling? What about the thing that we're actually making? And I just want to stress that it's, remember that what you're making has to be attached to the thing that you're selling. Don't make your short form, if your short form content is better than the thing that you're selling, don't sell it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. We're going to wrap up. Unfortunately, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. I know these people can, but they're very busy and they have things to do. So we're going to wrap up with this. You're like, am I? Good. All right, we'll be here for the next couple hours then. Just kidding. Let's go. Let's just do like a cute little, like, what was like your pinch me moment? Like a pinch me moment in the industry that you had that you were like, oh my word, I'm here. This is the best day ever. I made it.
Being here at Grammy U with all of you.
Good answer.
It's true. That actually is true. Being here is really nice. As a musician and as a person, as a kid who grew up watching the Grammys and being obsessed with nominations and seeing all of your favorite artists and it being a gateway for discovery and watching your heroes on television talk about what they do and why they do it while they accept their awards. Pretty nice. So this is a big pinch me moment. It's really nice to be here. The second one I'll say very quickly, I do feel very strongly that you should not make art just for awards. Awards are phenomenal and amazing accolades that are wonderful to have. It's not all about awards, but they're nice to have. My pinch me moment absolutely was my first Tony nomination. Watching the nominations as a kid, is watching the Grammys and the Tonys and the Oscars and all of the other nominations that come out, and then hearing my show and then going to the ceremony and seeing my name in the program. That was a pinch me moment, and that made me realize anything that I want, I can have, and anything that you want, you can have.
Beautiful.
I don't know how to top that. That's beautiful. I think for me, it's what came to my head was meeting Gloria Steinem.
Cool.
And having the honor of telling her story in the theatrical setting, and being there at the beginning and just being in a room with Daryl Roth and Gloria Steinem and myself, and thinking, oh my gosh, and that this icon is allowing us to tell her story, and all the things that you mentioned it, Pete, about, like, you know, theater as a social change and theater as that. So that was mine. But honestly, I could probably say the same thing about the new artist who I don't know is going to be that legend and go, I was there when. And you know, that's why I really believe it's important for all of us up here that you know, we listen to the new voices, we network, we talk, we you know, Daryl's instilled in me that we read every script that comes to us because someone wrote it, someone spent time on it, and maybe it's not for us, but if someone has spent time, it's worth reading, and your music is worth listening to. And might take us a long time to do it, but you know, that's hopefully that's something that we can, you know, do for each other.
That's beautiful.
For me, we talked earlier about you know, trying to affect culture and trying to predict what an audience is going to want before they even know what they want. So for me, every time that I've got my creative fingerprints on something, from my office or from my role as an A&R, when that project gets out to the world and people start singing it, or, you know, you're in a car and the car next to you is, you know, you hear it on the radio and they're singing along with it. I remember when I worked on the Santana record, our big record, our big single was this song called Smooth that was, you know, pretty much birthed in this little windowless office that I had. And I put my heart and soul into that song, into that project, and I had no idea what the results were going to be. I had little kids at the time. We went apple picking in upstate New York, and when you finish picking your apples, you sit down and you have like apple cider, donuts, and there's a jug band performing for the families. And when the jug band broke into Smooth,
Wow.
I was like, pinch me. You know, this is what it's all about.
and now we can't stop hearing smooth wherever we go at all times.
I pinch myself a lot.
Yeah. I think my pinch me moment is I think the thing that we're all after in this room is the word yes, because all we get are no's all day long, and you are all signing up for a career of no's. That's what this is, and it's very true that every no is just it's just a detour on the way to the yes. So I think that anytime, I mean, it's true what you said. When somebody emailed me and asked me to be on this panel, I thought, oh my God, I'm not a fraud. Yeah. Somebody actually thought I'm not a fraud. Yeah. And I think that's vital to your self-belief, that somebody else said, hey, what about you? Or asked you your opinion or whatever. So I think when you try to go for an art form and you try to make it a profession, every single time somebody says you, that's a win and a pinch me moment for sure.
That's beautiful. I want to add to that. I want to add my pinch me moment, which was actually the opposite. And it was when I got fired from the Broadway show I was tapped to do. And it was the revival of On the Town in 2015. I did the pre-Broadway tryout of it at a regional theater and got fired from it. And no explanation, no nothing. It was a bunch of us that weren't asked to go transfer to Broadway with it. But for some reason, I had a very positive reaction to it because I was like, I'm here. I'm part of the industry. I got fired from something because I was in the room. I already got there. And yes, would I have liked to make my Broadway debut? Absolutely. That would have been another pinch me moment, right? But it was affirming because I had been there. And it was also freeing because I said, great, what's next? How am I going to create and keep working to make sure that I avoid getting fired from things, of course, but it was very freeing and very affirming, even though the outcome was not exactly what I had anticipated or wanted. But it meant that I was here, and we're here, and you're here, and that's what matters. Give yourself a round of applause for being here. What an amazing day. Give yourself, give these panelists a round of applause for being here. We have Erich Bergen, we have Pete Ganbarg, we have Adam Hess, and we have Christen James. And I'm Michael Kushner. Thank you so much.